Our first session this morning is actually, I'm calling it a panel session because it is presented by several different people. I'm going to read all of their brief biographies that they submitted, and then I will, whoever is doing the share screen can go ahead and take over at that time. All right, first on my list for this morning's presenters is Kevin Kishimoto. Kevin Kishimoto is the head of music metadata services for Stanford University Libraries. He previously served as MOUG's continuing education coordinator from 2020 to 2022 and is currently chair of the MLA Linked Data Working Group and a member of the MLA Preservation Committee. Kristi Bergland is the music metadata librarian at the University of Minnesota Libraries. She received her MLIS from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, studied ethnomusicology at the University of Norway, Trondheim, and also holds a Master's of Music and a Doctor of Musical Arts, both from the University of Minnesota. Her research interests include Scandinavian vocal music, music of the American Moravians, practical approaches to e-scores and circulating collections, and using linked data to enhance music discovery. When not in the library, she enjoys gardening and kayaking. Treshani Perera is the head of Fine Arts Library Technical Services at the University of Kentucky Libraries. Treshani holds original and complex copy cataloging, Treshani provides original and complex copy cataloging for all formats in the Fine Arts Library and oversees operations in cataloging, physical processing, binding, and preservation, and manages several special projects. Clare Spitzer is the Sound Archives metadata librarian at Stanford University's Archive of Recorded Sound, where she is responsible for providing cataloging and metadata for sound recordings and related materials. She previously held the position of Special Project Music Metadata Librarian at Stanford Libraries, and before moving west, she worked at the New School in Library Technical Services. Laura Yust is a senior music cataloging specialist in the music division at the Library of Congress. She has worked there since 2003. Emma Clarkson is a metadata specialist in the digital research division of the New York Public Library, where she works with digitized collections from the Library of the Performing Arts. She has a BA in English from Yale and worked as a stage manager and arts administrator before receiving her MLIS from the University of Washington in 2022. She joined the Linked Data Working Group in August. All right, whoever is going to be the first person to share screen, feel free to do so and take it away.
All right, how's that looking? Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks good, Kristi.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, Margaret, for the introductions, and let's get started. So, in library circles, there's been much talk of linked data over the last decade, but until fairly recently, this talk has been largely theoretical, with many folks facing the chicken versus egg conundrum. Well, if linked data doesn't exist, then how do we learn more about it? Or on the other hand, why should we create linked data if we don't know what it can do? So in this session, our MOUG colleagues and I will tell you about our experiences using Wikidata as a way to explore and create linked data about music and what we have learned so far. We'll each give a short 5-minute presentation on a separate topic or project. So, can you back that up, Kristi?
Oh, yep. Yep. Oh,
there we go. So the first question is Wikidata. So before I go any further, let's clear one thing up. Wikidata is not Wikipedia. While they have similar names and are supported by the same foundation and are both free and collaborative, Wikipedia and Wikidata have different purposes. Wikipedia, as you know, is a collaborative encyclopedia containing articles on many topics. On the other hand, Wikidata is a free, collaborative, multilingual secondary database collecting structured data to provide support for anyone in the world. Emphasis on the words structured data. Wikidata does not contain articles made up of paragraphs and sentences, but instead contains data in a pure form. Next slide. So why Wikidata? Well, Wikidata is a free database that doesn't require a subscription or any special software besides a web browser. Wikidata is fairly easy to use and understand with a very low barrier to entry. Wikidata is supported by a solid infrastructure, a large community of practice, and an established governance. Wikidata is not likely to disappear from the internet anytime soon. Wikidata has many useful gadgets and tools to assist in data creation and remediation. Wikidata is flexible, and it's possible to create data to suit many projects. Wikidata has built-in query tools that allow access to the data once it has been created. And because it's an open environment, Wikidata can support sharing data and collaboration between libraries and other cultural heritage communities. Next slide, please. So why Wikidata for us? And that is, why should libraries and catalogers care? Wikidata's structured data allows for complex description of concepts and objects and relationships between these entities. And catalogers already live in this headspace, so working in Wikidata should not be a far reach. Additionally, Wikidata's structured data is linked data that can be read and understood by both humans and computers alike, opening this data up to possible machine actionability. In Wikidata, one can create direct relationships to library-centered vocabularies and authority files, as well as to other databases. And Wikidata could act as a bridge between library catalogs and non-library data sources, perhaps enhancing catalog functionality. And Wikidata's structured data is based on the RDF model, the same model that is the basis for BibFrame and other linked data ontologies. So learning about Wikidata means we're learning about linked data. Next slide, please. So I've been emphasizing the positives of Wikidata, but there are a few caveats I'd like to share just for fairness sake. Because Wikidata is open, one should become familiar with and follow community standards and practices. Because Wikidata is open, its ontology has developed organically and may be inconsistent. Because Wikidata is open, anyone can create and edit data, and even edit data that you have created. Because Wikidata is open, with a large community, users have diverse backgrounds and perspectives and may have differences in opinion on data models or which facts are facts. And finally, Wikidata is not really a substitute for the library catalog. Wikidata can model some types of information very well, but catalogs are more efficient in describing things that these are things that our library owns. Think of Wikidata as a way to add value to library information. So now let us hear from our other colleagues' experiences using and creating data in Wikidata. And first up is Laura. Oh, Kristi, Laura, I think you're going to have to
Read. Okay.
read it. Okay, go ahead.
This project represents my introduction to using Wikidata. I'll provide a little background information, show the Wikidata elements I used, and explain a couple of obstacles I encountered. Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge was an important patron of music who commissioned many works. These commissions were granted from 1925 until the mid-90s. Some of the most iconic chamber music works of the 20th century were the result of a Coolidge commission. The commission stipulated that the holograph manuscript of each score should be deposited in the music division collections. While this project started with the idea of working on linked data access to the holograph manuscripts of the Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge Foundation commissions, the main goal has evolved. Because of copyright restrictions, only the sketches for one work have been digitized and placed online. So the interim goal now is to work on linked data access to finding aids generally related to the commissions. I have created Wikidata items for the holographs of several of these commissions and for finding aids for several composers' papers. Next, please. The project so far has involved organizing the data in an Excel spreadsheet and creating Wikidata items. It's possible to create Wikidata items as a batch process using the open source software OpenRefine, but for a project of this size, it worked well to create them individually. I chose a subset of 18 holograph manuscripts from the larger group of commissioned scores, which provided enough data to work with as a start. Yellow and green highlighted QIDs represent Wikidata items I created. Most composers' names and some works were already established in Wikidata. In creating the project parameters, it was helpful to think of the bibliographic data in terms of RDF triples. The data is divided into Ferber-like categories for the work. Next, please. The manuscripts or items. Next, please. And the archival collections. Next, please. Here are the headings of the three spreadsheets. The property instance of in red font applies to all categories. The QID is generated by Wikidata once these items are either created one at a time or batch uploaded. Next, please. This slide shows statements that define the Coolidge Auditorium in Wikidata. During the process of organizing the data, I realized that there was no Wikidata item for the Coolidge Auditorium or for the Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge Foundation, so I created these items. I needed to create these Wikidata items in order to specify the location of first performance and funding source for each commissioned work. In January, a Wikidata editor, Mr. Synergy, apparently ran a data cleaning bot that deleted the item for the Coolidge Auditorium. It was deleted because it didn't meet Wikidata notability standards. There are several criteria for notability, and each item needs to meet at least one of the criteria. I had not included source citations for at least one of the defining statements. Mr. Synergy restored the item moments after receiving the email request, which explained that it was created for a new project in progress. Once the item was restored, I was able to add the needed citation. In the process of correction, I realized that creating a Wikidata item is not unlike creating an authority record. The link to the finding aids for composers' papers and the finding aid for the Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge Foundation collection is the logical place to start until individual manuscripts can be placed online. I plan to keep working on this project and look forward to creating a body of linked data elements that will enable flexible and dynamic discovery outside an internal catalog. Thank you.
Hello. So the project that I'm sharing today is not actually one that I originated. I only joined the linked data working group in August, at which point it was already scoped and in the early stages, but it has been a fantastic opportunity to collaborate and to learn about Wikidata and some other tools. This is one of two projects in process by the working group on building thematic index concordance concordances in Wikidata for Mozart and Vivaldi, respectively. The idea being that the structure of linked data is ideal for something where you have multiple thematic indices using different catalog codes to refer to the same works, where sometimes those codes are retired or updated or work attribution changes. So our goal for the Vivaldi project was to develop a data model that could reflect those complexities, to create or enhance existing Wikidata items for all of Vivaldi's works, and to establish that concordance functionality by entering multiple catalog code statements on each item for the Riom, Rinaldi, Fana, and Pincherley catalogs. Additionally, we wanted these items to link out to the LC name authority file as well as VOF, and to provide basic descriptive statements like form, tonality, and instrumentation. Next slide, please. Kevin did all of the work to get our initial data set, basically aggregating a complete list of RV numbers from the internet, exporting from LCNAF where those could be matched up, and querying Wikidata to get the Vivaldi work items that already existed. Poking around those items was an important step and sort of a reality check about this ecosystem of metadata, which is not an authority file. There's a wide range of descriptive practice and completeness, from items that exist but have no English label or title entered because they were created by an editor in another language, to one item representing all three Dixit Dominus settings in one, for I do not know why. In cleaning up some of these items, we refined our data model a little bit, and then the bulk of the project has been to work through the Riom catalog to verify what was in our spreadsheet and add to it before then putting that data into Wikidata. I'm a violinist, so I started with the violin concertos. And so for each work, I was generating a standard legible form for the title, checking the RV number with instrumentation and key, and noting any references to Anhangen. Riom lists both Fana and Pincherley. Then from the LC name title authority, I could look up the VOF ID and the Rinaldi numbers. Next slide, please. Then once we had a good batch of clean and confirmed concerti, we went into OpenRefine, which is a beautiful open source program for bulk manipulating data, and which has a built-in Wikidata reconciliation service, which essentially allows you to build a template Wikidata item, which is called a schema, and then push your spreadsheet through that template to create one new Wikidata item for each row. Next slide, please. To handle the more complex scenarios that don't fit that template, currently we're transcribing Riom notes about dubious attribution, other versions, or overlap with other works into a freeform notes field in our spreadsheet, then manually enhancing the corresponding Wikidata item once it has been batch created, because we can add qualifiers to statements. As an example, RV Anhang 97, which was formerly RV 13, has a catalog code statement RV 13, but that is deprecated with the qualifier superseded by later scholarship. And it has a composer statement for Vivaldi, but with the qualifying nature of statement as former attribution. So you can model these changes in attribution or reference without losing any searchability or accuracy. And those statements too are structured and queryable. Next slide, please. The batch item creation is pretty quick, but the manual prep is not. So far we have created about 275 items, and we have about 700 to go. Where we have added identifiers, it's fun to see these populating on id.loc.gov. And there's some very cool work happening at Cornell around enhancing catalog records with this data. One of the possible directions for this project is, once the data entry is complete, to design some interface or endpoint outside of wikidata.org that presents this data in a more coherent sort of concordance looking format. I picture something that could have sorting and faceting capabilities. Kevin's going to share a little bit about querying later, but the exciting thing really is the openness and reusability of this data and endless possibilities for enhancement. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to do a quick audio check. Am I good? Okay, awesome. All right, hello everybody. So my project focuses on sheet music publishers. So why this project? As part of my job responsibilities, I manage a large sheet music collection featuring popular songs from the late 19th century through mid 20th century. So on the right, I've included a screenshot from the collection metadata spreadsheet showing publisher data for each item. This data was transcribed from the publication. Long story short, while I was reviewing item level metadata for the collection, I came across various iterations of publisher names. I found several addresses for a particular publisher. Sometimes the publisher data found on one item conflicted with the location and dates for the same publisher on another item. Most publishers in this collection don't have a website, a Wikipedia page, or an entry in a reference source. Many of these publishers also don't have corporate name authority records. Meanwhile, I had all this data from the collection that could be used for creating some form of reference record for publishers. So I decided to create Wikidata records, or items, which is the preferred term to refer to Wikidata records. My initial goal was to create Wikidata items for 100 sheet music publishers found in the collection. I started the project by enhancing existing Wikidata items, then moved on to creating new items for publishers not represented in Wikidata. So why create Wikidata items instead of corporate name authority records? There's a very practical reason for that. I started NACO training only last year and knew it would be a while before I get to creating authority records on my own. Wikidata items are easy to create, and the platform is accessible with lots of free training resources. I knew I could still make an immediate impact since Wikidata is gaining traction in libraries. As Emma pointed out, Wikidata item URIs are now available in the Library of Congress linked data website, and Wikidata items are also making their way into library catalogs now. Next slide. So on the right is an example of a Wikidata item I enhanced as part of the project. The screenshot on the left is the corporate name authority record from the Library of Congress linked data website. As you can see, the URI for the Wikidata item is now included in the public view. Next slide. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to share the Wikidata model for this project. In library lingo, we would call this a metadata application profile. The purpose of sharing this model is to inspire you to also go out there and create Wikidata items for sheet music publishers. You can use this data model to also enhance existing Wikidata items. The Wikidata items I have created have a three-part structure. I'll share some examples later. There's a header or statement section and an identifier section. The metadata in the header is marked here with the red rectangle. The properties or metadata elements, starting with instance of, are considered statements. Some of these properties have a set value. For example, the value for the property industry, which is shown with the red arrow, is always music publishing. Some properties are optional, which are marked in italics. Optional data are not readily available in the collection metadata spreadsheet. I identified them as optional since I would need to do additional research to locate values. Next slide. So here's the rest of the statements section. As I mentioned earlier, some publishers have numerous cities and street addresses for the same date range. I decided to include that data using the properties marked inside this orange rectangle. So I used dates to provide context for each data point. Instead of start and end dates for the business, I use earliest date and latest date qualifiers for the location using data found in the collection metadata spreadsheet. When a date range is present, this was the most logical way to provide context for that data point. When a single date is available, I use the point in time qualifier to add that context. So as an example, the Adams Music Company has a single date, so the qualifier will be point in time. Adams V and Abbott Incorporated has a date range, meaning there were items in the collection with this date range. So for this publisher's Wikidata item, I am using earlier state and later state qualifiers. Next slide. The last section of my Wikidata model includes identifiers. I'm consistently using only 2 properties at this time. The first property is the Library of Congress Authority ID, for which the value is the LC control number. And the second property is the VIAF ID, and the value is the numeric ID. All right, next slide. So that's my project.
Treshani is frozen, question mark?
It looks like it, and I think she was concerned she might have some connectivity issues. Hopefully she'll be able to join us by the question period, but I think that was the end, so I think we're okay to just move on to Clare.
The Stanford Player Piano Program promotes the study and research into all aspects relating to the player piano and organ, especially as they relate to performance practices of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. A piano roll is a continuous roll of paper with holes punched into it that is used to operate a player piano or reproducing piano. The perforations in the paper are often recorded with a live performer, and in some cases, the performers on these rolls are the composers of the work being played. Stanford's growing collection of piano rolls are to be cataloged, preserved, digitized, and made accessible through Stanford's catalog. An ongoing metadata goal for the piano roll program is to explore ways to share Stanford piano roll metadata with external parties through alternate metadata ecosystems. Adding piano roll Wikidata items not only creates a new way to discover these piano roll collections, but can also be used to, that's a cat, but can also be used by the broader piano roll collector community. Many collectors keep their own inventories, and because anyone can create and edit items in Wikidata, we hope they'll consider sharing the roll data from their personal collections in this way. Next slide, please. This is the current draft of our Wikidata model for individual piano rolls. All Wikidata items must have a unique combination of item label and description. We use the title as given from the roll's leader for both the string value of the title property and the item's label, and give the description piano roll published by the company in the year it was published for all items. The instance of property is often the first property used in a Wikidata item and is defined as that class of which this subject is a particular example and member. For example, when describing a person in Wikidata, the first property and value would be instance of human. For piano rolls, we use music track without vocals in addition to music roll release, which is an item we created as a subclass of musical release to differentiate from the existing subclass of audio release. The distribution format property is piano roll. We also plan to create items for specific piano roll types as a subclass of piano roll to be used for distribution format. We also include catalog code, publisher, composer, and for the performer, we also use the instrument qualifier and value of piano. We link to musical work recorded on the roll using the recording or performance of property. For arrangements, we also use the property modified version of. If the piano roll plays only part of the work, like a single movement, we can qualify the link to the whole musical work by using the value partially for the nature of statement. Next slide, please. Initially, piano rolls in this collection were cataloged using MARC. We had a really awesome student employee studying computer science who pulled the values we needed for Wikidata items using MARC XML files, creating CSVs to work with and open refine. She graduated, but before she did, she built a tool so that we can convert any MARC piano roll record in the future. Going forward, we'll be cataloging rolls using mods and adding Wikidata items using those spreadsheets as we go. Next slide, please. Taking that CSV, I used OpenRefine to reconcile and link composers, performers, and musical works to their existing Wikidata items. I used our data model to create a wiki-based schema in OpenRefine to batch upload new Wikidata items, where I could drag the columns to be the values for Wikidata properties, as well as populate the values that are the same across piano roll items. Next slide, please. Here's a graph showing the links between piano roll items and their performers and composers. So far, we have about 70 test items for piano rolls in Wikidata. For this test, we've narrowed down the set to about 400 rolls of the same piano roll type. So I've created an item for that type of roll as a subclass of piano roll for distribution format properties. For this first batch, I grabbed all the rows in OpenRefine that had pre-existing Wikidata items for the composer, performer, and musical work columns. I've also created items for any performers not yet in Wikidata for that subset. This year, we'll be sharing the project and data models in a Wikidata project page to be shared with both the Wikidata community and piano roll collector community. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to have a much less technical little discussion here of our project with the Minnesota Hip Hop Collection. Just a little introduction. This Wikidata project we started, and some of the choices we made, how that played out, and what we chose to do differently to move forward on our project. The Minnesota Hip Hop Collection is a part of the Archie Givens Senior Collection of African American Literature. The Givens Collection hosts the Umbra Search and the Lou Bellamy Black Playwright Script Collection, among many, many others. The Minnesota Hip Hop Collection was created from materials gathered by a cultural studies and comparative literature PhD candidate to support his research and also produce the film We Rock Long Distance. There are 15 boxes of physical materials that were gathered between 1996 and 2014, and this includes CDs, LPs, cassettes, posters, books, booklets, stickers, interview footage that was not included in the movie, as well as hundreds of digital sound files. So we thought that the Hip Hop Collection would be a great candidate for trying to make some linked data. We wanted to, try our hand at this. That's what all the cool kids were doing. And there were lots of performers and producers and collaborations, and we thought we could bring more digital attention to that in a way that our catalog doesn't allow for currently. We wanted to build data sets that would somehow show these the relationships between these different people over time and places, who was rubbing elbows with whom, and how that could help tell the story of this collection, and bring, highlight some of the interesting things going on in our community that are not reflected in our traditional collection. And we, that being all of 2 people, a serials cataloger and myself, thought we would tackle the sound recordings on CD, around 300 physical items. And for reasons that in hindsight, neither of us can really explain, we jumped in using a profile set up by a colleague who was working on linked data for the Lou Bellamy Black Playwright Script Collection, tweaked a little to include information specific to sound recordings, which, as it happened, was quite a lot of data. We soon discovered a flaw or two in our plan, as several major things played out at once. First, and most importantly, it was just too big for us. There was just too much detail and work involved in completing all 300 CDs to the degree we had originally imagined. We lacked the background information on many of the CDs, which were small scale productions, perhaps in somebody's garage, but, many of them were regular commercial things, but they lacked many of the data elements that we're accustomed to using to create traditional bib records. And we quickly got into the weeds trying to research these things with the groups that didn't exist anymore and quickly got sucked down the Internet Archive rabbit hole. And then we also recognized our complete lack of knowledge on the subgenres of hip hop. Then the pandemic, which in addition to being its own agent of chaos, led to about 1/3 of our department staff leaving, including our bosses, our boss's boss, and all of the collections, the special collections folks who had ever had anything to do with this particular collection. And then George Floyd's murder and the following social upheaval led to some great conversations about our responsibilities as outsiders, even outsiders with good intentions, telling someone else's story without their involvement. So we paused, and then with some of Kevin's expert help in setting up, getting us on the path of righteousness with a better spreadsheet and approach, we have a new plan. So we have rescoped, decided to only focus on creators, and because that's going to be more manageable for us. We have a solid concept of what that actually means in a data concept, a data context, and we also decided to reframe. Unlike creating cataloging a CD for our library collection, we don't have to describe all aspects of a resource to make a contribution. This is an iterative process. So we're getting in the creator information, and then we're hoping that others, starting with our donor, who is now an established digital humanities librarian, can add to that, and also people in the community who have actual subject knowledge, and recruit. We realized that with our new staffing situation, we're way over our heads in what we're able to do. So we found an LIS practicum student through Sonia Archer Capuzzo, and have really gotten a lot more done with this. So we're in a much better position, and that's what I had to say. So Kevin, I'm passing it back over to you.
Thanks, Kristi. Just a second. There we go. Okay, so we've just heard from 5 colleagues about their individual Wikidata projects, creating structured data on a number of music topics, how they did it, and what their experiences were. So we're creating data, and that's great. But the next question is, or it should be, once we have created the Wikidata, what can we do with it? I hope we're not just creating data for the sake of creating data. So there are a number of use cases one can imagine, from enhancing our library catalogs with outside data to sharing our library created data with outside communities. But one aspect of Wikidata that I'm particularly interested in is query. Next slide. So I want to learn, how do you query Wikidata? And by extension, how do you query linked data in general? Are there tools that can help me do this? And what types of queries are possible in Wikidata? And can linked data improve discovery and access beyond what a MARC-based catalog can do? So for fun, I've been experimenting with different methods of querying Wikidata, trying to see what interesting things Wikidata's structured data can tell me. First, let me preface this by saying that I'm in no way any sort of query expert. I've learned about querying Wikidata by spending a few hours walking myself through their online tutorials and through a lot of trial and error. I still have a ton to learn. Next slide, please. So Wikidata has a query builder tool that allows something akin to a catalog advanced search, albeit requiring more precision, but also allowing more refinement. The query builder is useful for simple searches, such as I would like to find data about operas composed by Vivaldi or Handel. Next slide, please. But what I'm really excited about are the query possibilities with another built-in tool, the Wikidata query service. The query service is a Sparkle endpoint that allows you to search the entire Wikidata database using Sparkle, the standard query language developed to retrieve RDF linked data on the web and in triple stores. For the uninitiated, Sparkle has a bit of a learning curve, but once I became familiar with the construction and syntax of these queries, I found Sparkle to be a powerful tool. So what are some queries that Sparkle can perform? Since we only have a few minutes, I won't spend the time dwelling on the Sparkle code itself, but instead I want to give you a glimpse of a few interesting searches I was able to do. Next slide. So it's pretty easy to find Wikidata items for piano rolls. But with Sparkle, I was able to find those rolls on which a composer performs their own music. Next slide, please. Since Vivaldi composed so much instrumental music, how many times did he borrow from himself? So this query finds Vivaldi's works that are either full borrowing, like a different arrangement of the same work, or partial borrowing, for example, a movement used in more than one work. Next slide, please. In this search, in this query, I searched for compositions that were commissioned by the Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge Foundation and were premiered in the Coolidge Auditorium at the Library of Congress. And I'd also like to know which year the work was performed there. So I stuck that in there. Next slide, please. And to finally, let's take the Coolidge data a step further. So does the LC hold any holograph manuscripts of music commissioned by the Coolidge Foundation? And does LC have any archival collections of these composers who wrote Coolidge commissions? So, and finally, can you give me links to the catalog records for the manuscripts and links to the finding aids? Next slide. So, of course, the Wikidata queries can only query data that actually exists. Incomplete data bears incomplete query results. Thus, our colleagues here have been working on their projects, building larger and more complete data sets. These are not the only music-related Wikidata projects out there, and we are not the only ones working on them. So through Wikidata, we have been learning about linked data, and hopefully at the same time have been advancing music metadata for ourselves and for other cultural heritage communities. Wikidata has provided a really nice introduction to new concepts and practices, and has allowed us to splash around just a little in the linked data pool, getting our feet wet, so to speak. So come on down, join us. The water's really refreshing here in the shallow end. We even brought our floaties. Next slide. So if you want to find out more about Wikidata or Wikidata projects, please talk to any of today's presenters. Many of these projects had their genesis in the MLA Linked Data Working Group, of which we are all members. Thank you. And with that, what time is it? 9:46. I want to open this up to questions, but I had one prepped question that I was hoping to ask all of our panelists. And I think it's a nice one because it sort of gives a personal connection. So I'm hoping each of you can just give a short sentence on what about your project has you most excited? And I guess you can all jump in, or we can call on you. How about you, Emma?
Okay, today I would say I am most excited about something that I just learned about, which is that there's a property in Wikidata for lily pond notation. And so you can enter Lilliput notation and it will render in the Wikidata item in music notation. And so it's kind of getting a little ahead of myself about the idea of like putting incipits into some of the items and like elevating this project to actual thematic index status. I think that might be a ridiculous amount of work for like kind of a party trick. I'm not sure that's actually like a huge value add to what we're trying to do. But it was just something that I hadn't heard about. So that's what I'm excited about right now.
Cool. Treshani, what are you excited about today?
So I will say I've been really excited about being able to transform a work project into something else. I think I shared this in my talk. You know, we have all this data that is just sort of like sitting in a spreadsheet format. And so it's been an exciting opportunity to sort of like work with a different platform using existing data from a different collection.
Thanks, Treshani. Laura, what are you excited about the project?
I'm actually excited to just be learning how to create Wikidata and learning about the different ways it can be used. And also the 100th anniversary of the beginnings of the Coolidge Commissions is coming up in 2025. And so I'm excited to be contributing to the universe of data. And I hope that maybe I can, if I keep working on this project, that it could be maybe another means to connect people to the resources related to those commissions.
Great, thanks, Laura. Claire, what has you excited about this project?
I think it's exciting to see the links between items we've created when they're graphed and to think about the different ways they can be queried for research purposes, like Kevin's example of roles where performers play their own compositions. I'm also excited about the potential of piano roll collectors sharing information on Wikidata instead of keeping it siloed in their own spreadsheets or FileMaker Pro databases.
Cool. And Kristi?
I'm excited about actually how this has played out working with my student intern. She had some background, you know, some coursework in cataloging, but really seeing how working on this project helped her understand all of the cataloging stuff in an immediate and different way, and just changed the way she talked about that, I thought was really exciting as we're, you know, looking at catalogers of the future and keeping people interested in this field. I got excited about that.
Great, thank you. And I guess, what am I excited? I guess I should say I'm excited that I get to learn something new and it's fun. I'll just leave it at that. I've been having such a great time this last year, just learning more and more about Wikidata and what it can do. It's got some really interesting things going on there. It's not perfect, but it's a great place to play around and do fun things. So I guess we should open this up to, I don't know if am I the moderator at this point? Can someone like go through the chat and see if there are questions that need to be answered? Because or does anyone have a hand up that wants to ask a question verbally?
Oh, Kevin, this is Damien. A lot of the conversation are just side conversations that are tangentially related to this. So sorry, we got excited about certain questions, all the presentations raised. So there we go.
Okay. Mark Scharf asked about the thematic catalog project and what implications does this have for future creation of concordances? Will it discourage production of print resources? I don't know. I mean, I think it's a lot easier to create a concordance in any online tool rather than get it printed and published, but I don't know if this will discourage the publication of print resources. I hope not. I mean, I love print resources. I think what's interesting about the concordance thing that we are working on is if a new catalog comes out and is available, we don't have to reprint the entire book from scratch. We can just add in the new catalog information into what exists in the Wikidata platform, or if we choose to export the data into another platform. So it's sort of, it can be iterative, as Emma says. Okay, I see a hand up from Tom.
Yeah, I guess this is a question sort of more, well, for Laura, but for anyone else. And I guess it just has to do more with the negotiation process for when someone decides to challenge your data creation and publishing. I don't know if you explained how your example worked, but have you ever heard about bias in Wikidata editors, people challenging you? I just see this as potential, if this project gets big enough, that it could be weaponized against people.
I think this, I mean, I don't know if Laura has something to add here. I think yeah, it's a huge platform. There are lots of people working in it with differing opinions on data models, on, you know, how things should be. And because I think there are, I think it's a little less incendiary than something like Wikipedia, where you are, you know, writing text. And you know, Wikipedia, because it is text, sentences and paragraphs, you often do have to insert your opinion as a person into that sentence. There's, I mean, just language includes opinion. And so, but I feel like Wikidata is a little bit less so, because you are stating what are known, or not known, but thought to be facts. And it does require, you know, or it doesn't require, but it encourages the use of references in the same way that Wikipedia does, in that you should state where you got this information from. Now, can it be weaponized? I guess anything can be. I don't. I can't say that it would be or not, but I don't know if I even got close to answering your question.
I mean, just taking that question back a decade or so to that publication of a choral work, I think that was plagiarized, I think. And then, you know, if someone would come along and then edit various online sources to prove their point. Yeah, I just maybe this is a reason for us not to just be creators, but to become part of that community of editors as well.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. Damien, do you have a question?
Just a quick comment on the thematic indexes thing, you know, just from a equity point of view, you know, people want to be paid for their work. So I, you know, doing concordance work, that's work that takes time. So someone is going to have to be willing to do it, and we can't rely on the largesse of people to do it in their free time. So publishing platforms might change, of course, but you know, I think there'll be plenty of people who are out there who would be willing to do concordances and things of that nature. They may be more of an online thing, but I don't think that will obviate the need for that sort of thing.
I think I definitely agree with you. I think there's some parallel to be drawn with Wikipedia and the fact that it, you know, hasn't completely superseded other reference works, even print reference works. Where, you know, you might turn to Wikipedia for like a quick fact, but if you need solid citation for published work, it's probably still going to be from a different resource that is being generated in sort of the more like conventional slow scholarship. And I think like Wikidata is behind Wikipedia as far as sort of adoption, but I think we can kind of look at the way that Wikipedia has gained traction and reliability kind of as, you know, there's obviously qualifications to that, but it has sort of gained broader adoption, but still it's not completely superseding other scholarship.
Are there any other questions? I'm kind of trying to scroll through the long chats. Why does the Copeland collection start at 1841? It could be a typo. Sorry. I mean, it could be a.
It's not a typo.
Oh,
There's
it's not.
stuff in there. It's stuff in there from 1841. This is stuff Copeland collected.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So when we archival practice, we just don't get rid of. We can't get rid of the stuff that. Well, it's not really it. You know, Copeland didn't write it, so we'll get rid of it. That means we'd get rid of all of the correspondence in the Copeland collection. So there.
I see. Yeah, I didn't keep reading down there. Any other questions? Scrolling as fast as I can.
Kevin, I'm afraid we're running out of time here.
Okay.
I've got 11:59.
Okay, perfect.
I will most definitely share this chat with all of you presenters so that you can take a look at it, because as Damien said earlier, there were a lot of side conversations going on, very interesting conversations going on as well. So I will share those with all of you. And I would like to take a moment to thank you all for your presentation. I know I learned a lot about Wikidata this morning. And if everyone else can do a virtual hand clap or a wave, please do so, because we really do appreciate what you've shared with us today.